back to 1967, right? This is a year of total social upheaval in America. This is the year of the Vietnam draft. This is the year when race riots are breaking out across the country in cities like Newark and Detroit. This is the height of the civil rights movement. And there is this woman singing about respect. And not only is she singing about respect, she's spelling it out. I think about how revolutionary that moment in time was for a Black woman to be in charge of her life, in charge of her career, dazzling audiences, and commanding and demanding respect across the airwaves.
Hey, little girl, you're sweeter than honey, and I'm about to give you all of my money. All I want you to do is give it to back when I get home.
This song wasn't even originally intended for a woman. This song was originally performed by soul singer Otis Redding. And the concept was, it was a man saying, when I get home, I don't care what you do when I'm not here, I want you to respect me. And that's an age-old desire, right? A man saying, when I get home, I want to feel like I'm the king of the castle. That's kind of the tone of the song. And it was a relationship song. It was a man singing to his woman. And then enter Aretha Franklin, who takes this song and totally turns it on its head. And no longer is this a person just talking to their lover saying, when I get home. This is a woman saying, when I get home, I want you to respect me. And here we are in 2018, and we still have women trying to figure out how they can get that same power that they're finally getting out in the world, in their own homes, in their own relationships, in their own sex lives as well. When Aretha sang it, it took on an even broader meaning because it wasn't just a woman telling her lover, I want you to respect me. It was a Black woman really telling the world, I want you to respect me as a woman, as a person of color, as a woman of color. And I think that's the reason why this song would go on to not just become sort of this empowerment anthem for women and the anthem of the civil rights movement, but also the anthem for Aretha Franklin. Because this is a woman who, by her very nature, by her very being, by the way she lived her life, as we are going to explore a little bit further, commanded in every sense of the term respect. So I want to look at her life and consider the ways in which women, you and I, go about within this world commanding respect, getting power, and getting sovereignty. And by sovereignty, I mean being in the driver's seat of your own life, calling your own shots, whether that's the shots in your career, what you want romantically, the kind of lifestyle you want, calling your own shots and not having decisions about your life being made for you. To me, in my opinion, that's what it really means to be a queen.
Don't get mad, get flaky. All this dance you don't know. Let Aretha show you how it goes. First you spread your feet out.
So the first thing I think we can learn from Aretha is that you are not your past. So to know her story, particularly to know how she grew up, is to know that life for her was not a crystal stair.
And
So she was born in 1942 in Memphis. She grew up in Detroit. Her mother left the family, and this is sort of a contested story, but her mother pretty much abandoned them when she was 6. And by the time Aretha turned 10, her mother had passed away. And so she was raised primarily by her father, who was a very well-known and prominent Baptist preacher, also a civil rights activist in his own right, and that would play into Aretha's life as well. And she did not have this idyllic childhood. When she was 12, she became pregnant by a boy in her neighborhood. When she was 15, she became pregnant again by someone else. And so at age 15, Aretha Franklin had 2 children And at 18, she went to New York City.
You never know.
So when she arrives in New York, not only does she begin really orchestrating her career, being very careful about the decisions of who produces her and that sort of thing, but when she gets into New York, she ends up marrying a man named Ted White, and he becomes her manager, and that is not a happy marriage.
I've still got to find out who and what I really am. I don't know yet. I'm trying to find the answer.
Is it abusive marriage?
Take my hand.
Her father, who she's very close to, he was shot twice during a home invasion. He was in a coma for 5 years, and he ultimately passed away. Shortly after the father passed away, both her brother and her sister passed away from cancer. So there was a lot of struggle, there's a lot of grief, there's abuse, there's abandonment early on in her life. And to know these anecdotes is to get them really from other people, because Aretha didn't really talk that much about the struggle. She didn't really dwell on it. She didn't really speak it, continue to speak it into existence. She sort of focused on her desire and focused on what she wanted out of life. But that struggle does turn up. I mean, in her voice, in her music, we really can sense that this is a woman who's been through some things. And I think that that pain and that life experience turns up in her music, but in a very, very beautiful way.
Ain't no way for me to love you if you want. Let me.
And this is a woman who always kept her eye on the prize. She knew she was special. She was confident in her gifts. She knew that she was here for a reason. She knew she was here to communicate to the world and in some ways to sermon the world through song. And she respected that that was her purpose and that was her gift, and she honored that. And she was hell-bent on living her best life regardless of what she'd been through. And I'd say, if anything, those experiences of her past just added seasoning and spice to the person that she would become. And so I say that to you because I think everybody has trials and tribulations, and they're really just there to guide you towards what you ultimately are meant to become. They are there to prepare you. They are there to maybe humble you. They are there to teach you. They are there to help you build that inner strength. We talked a bit about that in the Oshun video, how trials and tribulations can give you the pain that you can turn into power, but they're not there to define who you are meant to become.
Many say that I'm too young to know just where, let you know just where I'm coming from. But oh, you will see that it's just a matter of time.
Aretha Franklin lived her life honestly and authentically, and above all, she did not apologize for who she was. Because let's be real, Aretha Franklin is not just the queen of soul. Aretha Franklin is the queen of shade.
Taylor Swift.
Okay, great gowns, beautiful gowns.
This is a woman who didn't fly. This is a woman who loved to throw lavish parties. She loved to be over the top. She loved her furs. She was fiercely competitive. She threw tantrums. She was, somewhat controlling when it came to her music. She lived life to the fullest. She was over the top. She dressed the way she wanted to dress. She didn't care if you liked her outfit or if you didn't. She didn't care if you thought she should have on a different bra or a bustier. This is a woman who demanded that she be paid in cash up front before she hit the stage. I mean, this is a woman who called the shots in her life. She never apologized for who she was, and I honestly think that that is the essence of feminine bravado. But I also really think that's the ultimate requirement for commanding, and notice I'm not saying demanding, but commanding respect, right? When there are people who are who they are and they really don't care what you think about them, you may not like them, but there's something inside of you that's kind of like, I gotta respect them. That's what gives you respect. And I think in our world, a lot of time, women, we are taught that part of femininity is sort of being less, it's playing small, it's being meek, it's tiptoeing around, male egos, and it is conforming to what society tells us to be, to what our crush, likes. In some ways, we send these messages to young girls and to women, and that is the opposite of commanding respect. And it's one thing to charm a person, it's one thing to enter a person's spirit and to seduce them. Totally different thing. Check out 5 Laws of Feminine Power. But when we talk about commanding respect, it's about being who you are, being authentic, being honest, and being totally unapologetic. Aretha Franklin was not just the voice of her generation, she was an activist. She was the daughter of an activist. She refused to perform in front of segregated audiences. When feminist activist and scholar Angela Davis was arrested in 1970, wrongfully arrested for kidnapping and murder charges, she was ready to cover her 6-figure bail. This is a woman that, stood for something. She stood for equality. She stood for respect. And she had those principles, those guiding principles throughout her life. And I think that when you stand for something, regardless of what it is, when you know your values, you know your principles, you know what it is you stand for, you know your boundaries, you know what it is you will put up with and what it is you will not. I mean, let's be real. At that time, saying publicly that she would pay the bail for a woman that they accused of being a communist, that they accused of being radical and all these things, she could have been blacklisted. Saying I'm not going to perform in front of a segregated audience, that was leaving money on the table back in the day. But this is what she believed in. And again, I think when you have something you believe in, you have principles that you stand by, whether they are principles or boundaries that play out in your relationships, play out in the workplace, or just in life. That is an essential way that we as women command respect, that we command power, and that we maintain sovereignty over our lives.
My baby loves me. He told me that, and I never questioned that point of fact. There is no fighting.
Now, I was really surprised to learn that Aretha Franklin, as talented as she is, arguably like one of the best female vocalists of all time, right? She practiced her music for at least an hour a day. And I so admire that kind of dedication and refusal to take her gift for granted, because let me tell you, there are probably singers and performers that have this much of her talent that do not practice their craft every single day. So not all of us are the queen of soul, but you're the queen of something. You may be the queen of writing, the queen of cooking, the queen of laughter, the queen of comedy, the queen of charm. You're the queen of something. You've been given some skill set. You've been given some intuitive intelligence. You've been given some talent that it's so easy to take for granted, because a lot of times when things come easy to us, we have a tendency to not value them. And one of the things that I think really helps women get respect is by being committed to being their best self and being committed to their purpose and their passions. So whatever it is that excites you, that thrills you, whatever it is that you're good at, bank on that, capitalize on that, invest in that, be the absolute best, because not only does that command respect, not only does that bring you power, but it also inspires everyone around you. And I remember I was sitting in a car earlier today, and I heard a producer who worked with Aretha, and he said, she was a perfectionist. She would come in and she would produce her producer. She had gone over the music. She was totally prepared. She knew how she wanted to arrange it. She knew, everything. It really did not really intimidate people. It made everyone else around her want to be their best. It made everyone else around her want to step up to the plate. And so I think about how that plays out in every aspect of our lives when people know that we go hard, when people know that we take ourselves seriously, that we take our talents seriously, we take our gifts seriously, we value who we are, we have self-worth, we are constantly investing in ourselves, we are constantly exploring our passion, we are constantly dedicated to self-care and living our best lives. Not only does it command respect, but it also inspires everyone around you. And I think that plays out by influencing all of your relationships, whether they're romantic or platonic, for the better. I would say the thing that most inspires me about Aretha Franklin is that she lived with soul. Now, what does it mean to live with soul? Let's think about soul food. Soul food is something that originates right in the South. It originates really during American slavery. So we're taking food that grows in the ground, or we're taking food that people don't want, and we're turning it into something amazing.
More brown sugar to it.
Brown sugar.
So it kind of sticks to the ham.
For the Queen of Soul, please, Michael.
Brown sugar.
Michael, put your hand in here.
It's about pleasure. It's about indulgence. You don't count calories when you sit down and eat soul food, right? When I think about soul music, I think about music that you can literally feel in your soul.
Ooh, la, 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 la. Ooh, la, 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 la. We should have been a duo.
It's music that moves you, music that moves the soul. So to live with soul is to live a life that moves you, to live a life full of passion, to live a life doing things that bring you happiness, that bring you delight, even if there's struggles along the way. It's to live life to the fullest, to work hard, to play hard, to laugh hard, to love hard, to go for it, to take risks, to take the adventure, to focus on the now, to not get hung up on the past, but to live with soul.
We going riding on the freeway, all love in my pink Cadillac.
In our diet-conscious, restrained society where we're always telling people to hold back, to do less, to be less, to conform, to follow the followers, to be afraid, we're always tapping into people's fears. People do not often live with soul, right? People live with logic, right? People do what they're expected to do. Living with soul is really just taking life by the lapels and shaking it. She was truly the Queen of Soul, not just for the words and the music that was coming out of her mouth, but for the way she designed her life and the way that she lived her life. And that's certainly something we can take. And finally, when I think of soul food, I think of spice, right? You cannot have bland soul food. I think that literally doesn't even count. No such thing, right? And I like to think of your life experiences, the good and the bad, the joy and the pain, as the spice of your life. Those experiences, those trials, those triumphs, those tribulations, that's the seasoning on your life. Everything you've been through, that's what makes you you. That's what's leading you to your destiny. That's what's giving you that extra something. And that's what's giving you that spice. Think about the song Respected. Could Aretha have sang that song if she wasn't drawing upon the pain of a broken and abusive marriage? Or could she have sang Ain't No Way if she had not known death, heartbreak, and pain? Could she have sung Daydreaming without experiencing pleasure, ecstasy, and love? I think it takes robust confidence. I think it takes bravado. I think it takes a commitment to living your best life and living with soul. When we live unapologetically, when we commit to our passions, when we commit to our pleasure, when we commit to just living our best lives, I think then it's only natural that we as women command respect, we get our power, and we take sovereignty of our own lives. In other words, we become queens.